Thank you for attending this breakout session. This session is filled with powerful information to help improve your health and empower you. Radio Free 102.3 KJLH. We are you.
COVID-19 vaccines have arrived. They've been recommended by California's top medical experts because they've been proven to be highly effective and will build your immunity against COVID-19. They will be available at no cost. The COVID-19 vaccine can help protect you and your family and end the pandemic. And remember, keep wearing your mask even after you've been vaccinated. To learn more, visit vaccinateall58.com.
Welcome to the 21st Annual Women's Health Expo. My name is Ellie Andrews, and welcome to our breakout session. Today, we're just going to have a candid conversation about COVID-19 vaccine and the Black and African American community. Today on the panel is Dr. Rhea Boyd, MD, MPH, pediatrician, public health advocate, and co-developer of the conversation between us about us. Hello, Dr. Boyd.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
I'm definitely excited to have this conversation as well. There's so much going on, so many different questions. And so hopefully you're kind of answer those questions that we have. Now, just tell me a little bit about you, how you got started and why this cause is just so important to you.
So I work as a pediatrician, so I work in a clinic and I see kids, but I also do a lot of community-based work to help address some of the social needs that drive health outcomes in the country. And this project really started with Black doctors like myself just talking to each other saying, you know, we're worried about the disinformation we see targeting our community online, and we want to make sure that people have access to credible information about the COVID vaccines before they make this critical choice. And so we started planning this project actually before any of the vaccines even had emergency use authorization. We knew people would have questions. We knew those questions are legitimate and really important, and we wanted to respect them. And so we developed this really beautiful partnership between Kaiser Family Foundation and the Black Coalition Against COVID, which is a national coalition that represents the 4 historically Black medical schools. It represents the National Medical Association, which is the Black Physicians Association, the National Black Nurses Association, and many of the Black fraternities, sororities, and faith-based groups. And together we came together to say, what are we going to do about this information gap to make sure that we can meet people's needs? And we produced The Conversation Between Us About Us, this online series where folks can hear from Black doctors, nurses, and researchers all about the COVID vaccines.
That's amazing. So the conversation is more of a podcast, or what is it?
It's a good question. It's a few things. The first thing that it is a digital resource library. So if you go to our website, which is www.betweenusaboutus.org, you can find a series of 50 videos and growing that answer common questions about the COVID vaccines. So we feature various doctors, nurses, and researchers who have different levels of expertise. For example, we have some OBGYNs and pediatricians and internal medicine doctors who work with patients who have HIV, researchers who participated in the clinical trials, all asking the common questions that we hear from Black folks every day in our practice, and that Kaiser Family Foundation found in their extensive polling of Black populations as kind of the top questions that everybody has. And so you can go to our website and see all the series of questions that we have. And that's kind of one aspect of our project.
Hello, Black America, and people who pay attention to what Black folks are doing. My name's W. Kamau Bell. There's good news out there. There's a COVID-19 vaccine. Yay! But the bad news is, as Black folks, it's hard to trust what's going on. So what do? Well, we turn to people we can trust. Black folks. But not just your uncle at the cookout. No. Actually, not him at all. I'm talking about Black scientists, Black doctors, and Black nurses. Okay, first question. The vaccine happened fast, like super fast, like Usain Bolt headed to the bathroom fast. Is that something we should be concerned about?
Having an emergency authorization for these medications was critical, but that doesn't mean any steps were cut.
Anything where money could be traded off for time, that was happening. Like money was no object.
They still have all of the rigor that they use
for approving any vaccine. So we can feel confident that the science is still there.
The messenger RNA technology has been in development for the last 12 years. So even though you hear this thing about warp speed, believe me, that was not warp speed.
And I think the data is real. It suggests it's highly effective.
About a week or so after your second dose, the people who had gotten the placebo or who didn't get the true vaccine, their rates of coronavirus continued to climb, whereas the people who had gotten the vaccine, it just flattened out.
And what about side effects?
Soreness from the injection site.
I had a little bit of arm soreness.
Arm sore? Is that a side effect? My arm's sore right now.
The common things, soreness at the injection site, headache, fever, maybe a swollen lymph nodes.
The second dose is when there's more common, those systemic side effects.
Is this like one of those pharmaceutical commercials where at the end they talk real fast about the side effects and it's like, you're also gonna get hair from your eyeballs and vampirism?
My sister texted me the second day after I got the first vaccine, and I remember she was like, "Are you a zombie yet?" And we just laughed, like, "No, I'm not."
So the big answer is no. And the reason being is we are not injecting the virus into your body. The vaccine is training your body.
It is making those antibodies to fight that disease. So I view it as a positive thing.
So here's a question from everybody's uncle, and since I'm an uncle, it's a question from me too. Are the drug companies just trying to get rich off this?
The drug companies will certainly get rich.
Oh, drug companies are always trying to get rich, but that's not the point, right?
That is really how a lot of our innovation happens. That is why the drug companies will spend millions upon millions in research.
Were black and brown people a part of this process, or was it only like white folks, like NASCAR white folks?
The trials were intentionally broad and inclusive.
Yeah, black and brown folks have been recruited for the clinical trials.
We have ensured that each of the 4 historically black medical schools, that we are all vaccine trial sites.
So here's the big question. How much are you charging us for this vaccine?
Right now, getting vaccinated is free.
Free?
Yes, it's free.
Like free.
It will be free.
Like not even free 99.
We have not charged anyone.
Okay, should I be suspicious that you aren't charging us?
No, because there are some things that the government invests in that for the good of the people.
Taxpayers like you and I contributed to the development of these vaccines.
What if I'm not worried about getting COVID-19?
Like you could say, I never had smallpox, I've never had tetanus, why do I need the shot? That's why we give vaccines. Vaccines are prevention.
I pretty much tell people you're going to be exposed some kind of way, right? So you better be ready to fight.
And what about you? Have you? Will you?
I got my first dose about 3 weeks ago.
I have not gotten the vaccine yet, but rest assured, I'm anxiously waiting.
I definitely will be getting vaccinated when my turn comes.
I was scared getting it, and then after I got it, I was like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't that bad.
When the vaccine went in, I felt this intense amount of honor.
Like a lot of people, I like to get my medical information from bizarre, dark corners of the internet that haven't been vetted. Is that a good idea?
Oh dear.
Please do not continue to do that.
That is definitely not a good idea.
Unfortunately, on the internet, pretty much anyone can post anything.
There are no microchips. There's no stealing of your DNA. No, none of that is happening.
Thank you, doctors. All right, I'll let you get back to work. And thank you for allowing me to ask you these questions. But before you go, just want to let you know, your parents are super proud of you. It's all they can talk about.
The second aspect has been a lot of partnerships with Black-led organizations to bring the information right to folks. So if folks want to have their questions answered in real time, we also are hosting live conversations regionally so that folks can kind of call in and listen. And then in the South, we have a very specific effort to actually go door to door in rural communities to bring the information to folks who don't have internet access.
That is so important because a lot of times we suffer just because of the lack of knowledge. And so sometimes we just don't know things. And then sometimes we kind of fall into things unmistakably just because, again, our lack of knowledge. So that's really awesome that you're not only saying, hey, here goes the internet. You can do, everybody has the internet, right? But not all people still rock with the internet. So that's amazing. You guys are going door to door in those areas that are widely known for not having internet. Is that what that is?
Exactly. Through rural parts of the South where we know a sizable portion of our national Black population lives, who just doesn't have reliable broadband internet. So if you don't have enough capacity to actually stream a video, we'll just share some information right at your doorstep with a little kit that has kind of a little bit of PPE in it, like a little mask that you can wear and stuff like that, just so that you can have your questions answered too. I think everybody in this country deserves to talk to a credible professional about their questions about the COVID vaccine.
Exactly. And how has that response been?
Honestly, it's been really incredible. In the first 24 hours, I posted just to my own Twitter page, kind of our launch video, which featured W. Kamau Bell from CNN's United Shades. And, it's a 5-minute video that was about public health information. And in 24 hours, 200,000 people watched it. We now have, millions and millions of views on our YouTube page and on our website. And I think it just shows that people really do have questions and they really do want to hear from doctors who look just like them, who are helping answer those questions.
I am ready. I do hate needles though. I hate needles, but I love this. I think I had reservations in the beginning, but this is proven to be safe. We see what the alternative is. The alternative is so many of our lives have been lost. We just been sitting home with all our problems now. Taking that socialization away, I think it kind of hurt a lot of people, isolated us, and I'm ready to get back to that. I'm ready to go back to the movies, go back roller skating.
That it? That's it. So 15 minutes in the recovery area and you're good to go, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
It gives you a sense of power, so I can get my shield. People from all nationalities, all colors, all ways of life, all backgrounds are signing up, getting this thing, and everybody's gonna be okay.
Beautiful. Listen, I want to get straight to the nitty gritty. Okay. People have questions. I did a poll on my Instagram and I've got lots of questions for you. Women want to know a lot because a lot of times they are the people who get the information for the family and bring it back to the family and say, all right, this is why we need to do X, Y, Z. And so women in COVID-19 vaccines, let's get it started. Should you get a COVID-19 vaccine if you are taking birth control or prep for HIV?
Yes. And those are two questions that we also answer on our website if you want to hear it directly from specialists. But I'll give you the gist. Yes, you can, both if you are taking birth control and if you have HIV. I do want to highlight for patients who are taking birth control that there was just that pause for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because there was a very rare case of blood clots. And sometimes taking birth control can also increase your risk of blood clots. And so if your doctor has ever said to you that you are at increased risk for blood clots, then you might want to choose the Mrna or the Pfizer vaccines rather than the Johnson & Johnson. But it's important that people understand that the Pfizer, and Mrna vaccines have not been associated with that side effect. And so if people are concerned about it, particularly patients on birth control, you might consider those vaccines as the right choice for you.
Okay, got it. And speaking of, because there was a lot of confusion when it came to the studies in pregnant women and if you're expecting a child or what so have you, if you are taking birth control or whatever. Now, can pregnant or breastfeeding women get vaccinated against COVID-19?
Yes, the answer to that question is yes, absolutely. It's not just that you can get vaccinated, it's that it's actually recommended that you do get vaccinated. So part of the reason is because that we know that if pregnant women get COVID, if you contract COVID and you're infected with COVID, you have much higher risks of complications where you might get very sick have to go to the ICU or maybe even die as a result. So the risk of COVID in pregnancy is much higher than in the general population. And so protecting pregnant women is really important. And we just had some wonderful data that told us from the CDC that pregnant women who have received the COVID vaccines have not shown any signs of adverse consequences, meaning there haven't been any safety signals raised. We haven't seen any signs that the COVID vaccines cause any problems to pregnant women or to their unborn and recently born children. So all of the data is very reassuring and then suggests that actually it's recommended that pregnant women do get vaccinated.
Now, has the data actually came out when someone has taken the COVID-19 and then has had the child, like has taken the COVID-19 vaccine with the pregnancy, then has had the child?
Yes, and that data actually was included in the clinical trials. So often in the very early period where we're testing to see if the vaccines in this case or other drugs are safe, often in clinical trials, some members of the trials are women and they get pregnant, just like in real life. And you didn't know you were going to get pregnant, but here you are, and you already received this treatment, and then you get pregnant on the other side. And so even as early as the clinical trials, we were able to watch how pregnant women responded to the vaccines. And that's why early on, many of the professional associations that serve pregnant women and birthing folks, many of those organizations said, you know, early on from the clinical trial data, we can already say that it looks safe in pregnant women. But now that hundreds of millions of Americans have gotten vaccinated, including many, many, many more birthing folks, now we can actually say, looking back at that data, we do feel confident that it is safe. So we both have the clinical trial data that told us it was safe, but those numbers were much smaller. And then we have the data now on millions and millions of folks that tells us, yes, we can be confident that it is safe.
So does that mean the mom who got vaccinated, now that child is already vaccinated?
That is a great question. There is some data to suggest that moms who get vaccinated, if you breastfeed, that you can actually transfer the antibodies that your body makes, the fighter cells your body makes to fight COVID if you're exposed. You can transfer those fighter cells or your antibodies to your infant through your breast milk. So that's really reassuring because right now, as many know, babies and children are not yet approved to receive any of the COVID vaccines. So the only babies who will be protected are the ones whose moms were vaccinated, who then breastfeed, or whose whole family is vaccinated, so that around them, there aren't people who would transmit COVID to the infant. So good ways to protect your kids are to get your family vaccinated. And if you're a breastfeeding mom, it's to continue breastfeeding.
That's very interesting. I didn't even know that. So the umbilical, like whatever you are doing, it does not affect the baby while it's inside of you. So if the mom is vaccinated, the child doesn't all of a sudden get vaccinated like that, right? It's only if they are breastfeeding.
Yes, it looks like the antibodies are transferred through breastfeeding, but this will be an ongoing question as to whether babies of mothers who are vaccinated are born with natural immunity. That's a question that we don't yet clearly know, but it's a question that we're interested in and one that we'll follow closely. I can say that we know that for other common infections for which we encourage mothers to get vaccinated, for example, if you're pregnant, we encourage mothers to boost their Tdap, which stands for tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. And we do it mostly for the pertussis component because whooping cough can make infants pretty sick. And so we want to make sure moms don't get whooping cough. Yeah. When we give the mom the pertussis vaccine, she can also protect the baby from getting pertussis because she is also protected from getting pertussis or whooping cough. So there's kind of multiple ways that it works through. And I think we're trying to understand if it also just works kind of passively through the mom being vaccinated while the baby's still in utero.
Beautiful. Now you touched on it just a little bit, but the COVID-19 vaccines are not safe for children at this point. Is that right?
It's not that they're not safe. It's just that they haven't been tested yet. And so it's critical that everyone understands the process we go through before we say that it's safe and before then we recommend it for folks to get vaccinated. And that process begins with clinical trials. And the early clinical trials for the COVID vaccines just didn't include children. And so that's why the vaccines are available mostly for folks who are 18 and up, and Pfizer was available initially for folks who are 16 and up. Now there are clinical trials ongoing for children who are 12 to 15 and ones down even as young as 6 months of age. We had some data released recently about those clinical trials for kids who are 12 to 15, and it was amazing. It showed essentially that the vaccine was 100% effective, which means all the children who got the COVID vaccine, none of them contracted COVID during the trial. Now, clinical trials are really controlled environments. And so there's a difference between when we say it's kind of efficacious in a study, like 100%, and effective in real life. But 100% is incredible, which means kids can also garner the same benefits essentially that we've seen in adults from getting the COVID vaccines.
Wow. Now, are providers required to have parental consent before administering the vaccine to minors?
Yes, and that is just a basic kind of foundational practice in just clinical care, that before providers can give clinical care to children, their parents or the caregiver or the guardian has to consent to that. And so it's really important that parents and caregivers understand the safety data for themselves and for their kids. And right now, all we've seen from kids are the clinical trials, and it looks incredibly safe, the same way we've seen in adults, which is really reassuring. So right now, there aren't any vaccines approved for kids 16 years and younger, but it's looking like Pfizer and Mrna will probably be the first ones to begin to be approved. And there are some thoughts that that might happen as soon as the fall.
That's wonderful. Now, you mentioned the different types of vaccine, and we know Johnson & Johnson had some type of, there was some concern. So they took it down. They said, hold on, let's pause on the Johnson & Johnson. So I did get several questions on, like, is this even safe? Because it's all about one shot. That was the special thing with Johnson & Johnson, right? And so is there a concern that one shot won't do it? What's going on there?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Johnson & Johnson. So first, I want people to notice what our federal government did when they noticed this rare side effect. So 6 people who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine out of the 6.85 million at that time who had gotten it had this very rare side effect where they got blood clots, and a special kind of blood clots where also their platelets were low. Platelets are the type of cells that help your body clot blood. And so it was this very rare blood clot scenario that they saw in only 6 people out of almost 7 million. And with those 6, it was a handful of folks. They said, pause. We don't want anyone else to get it while we look closer to make sure, one, were those blood clots caused by the vaccine? Is it plausible that the vaccine caused them? Because it's important to understand that people get blood clots just in general. People have different risks for their blood clotting, and it wasn't clear that the vaccine caused it. So first they said, let's pause to see if it caused it. If it did cause it, let's pause to see if we can understand who's most at risk so that doctors can be advised how to treat the patients. Mm-hmm. Let's also pause to let people know we've seen this side effect so that everybody who might have symptoms of that side effect who received the vaccine know to check in with their doctor if they start to have those symptoms. And then let's create really clear guidelines about how to use it going forward. I think that was a really important demonstration of how closely we are analyzing every single person who receives a COVID vaccine. This wasn't hundreds of people who had a bad outcome. It started with 6 people and they paused an entire vaccine. So I hope what folks take from that is that we are doing across the country, our federal government and all clinicians who are working in this process are doing our utmost best to make sure that these vaccines are safe when we tell folks that they can receive them and they are safe. And so what that pause enabled the CDC and the FDA to do, and ACIP, which is kind of our national advisory group who looks at vaccines, what it allowed them to do is to create some more clear recommendations. And so Johnson & Johnson now is off pause. People can receive Johnson & Johnson if the one shot is a good dose for you, but it now comes with a warning so that people know that there has been this serious side effect. And that's really critical because if you've had a history of that rare side effect in the past, or if you've had a history of blood clots in the past, your provider knows that that's not likely the good vaccine for you, and you know to ask for a different vaccine.
Okay, so we're talking underlying issues when it comes to the blood clots, and that is up to you and your provider's discretion. Is that right?
Exactly.
When it comes to the Johnson & Johnson, but when it comes to the other 2, it has not shown any history of blood clots or anything like that.
No, and it's critical for folks to know that far, far, far more people have gotten Pfizer or Moderna. We're talking hundreds of millions of people, right? So we were less than 10 million people who had gotten the Johnson & Johnson at that time, and they paused it. But we have not seen any association with blood clots or really any other serious side effects, although there were some patients who had allergies to the vaccines, which were really rare, which is why when you get your vaccines, if you get the mRNA vaccines as well, you kind of wait 15 minutes afterwards so we can watch to make sure people aren't having those rare allergies. But again, hundreds of millions of people got the other ones, and there have been no reports of that same side effect.
Yeah, it's very interesting because at the beginning of the whole vaccine thing and people were getting them, you saw different people pass out. You saw different people have different reactions to it. I know there were several people with Palsy, I believe it was, and it scared a lot of people at first. Now you don't hear too many things going on. And so what was that? Does it alter your DNA? If you have underlying issues, should you be aware of that across the board? Talk to me about that.
Yes. So first, this is a really common misconception that we've heard repeated in our community. So I just want to say really clearly to everybody, none of the COVID vaccines alter your DNA. It's not possible. It's not just that they weren't created to do it, it's that it's not possible for them to do it. So none of them alter your DNA. And that's really important for everyone to understand. And in terms of the side effects that some people experience. So for example, you mentioned some people passing out. There are people who pass out at the sight of blood. There are people who pass out if you get a bee sting. For some people, if you have a really intense experience, you can experience passing out. We call that in medicine a vasovagal response. It's just a technical word for you get overwhelmed and your body helps you calm down by lying you down. Those are not related actually to the vaccine components. It's just something about how you process some medical experiences or other serious experiences. So there's been no data to show that people who get the vaccine are more likely to pass out. There was early reports that people might have Bell's palsy from the vaccines. Those have since been kind of debunked as well. So Bell's palsy is a process where you might notice it because you'll get numbness on the side of your face. And so somebody might have a little droop on their face and trouble moving one side of their face. And it can look really scary and feel really scary. It's typically temporary, and it's often caused by viruses, cold viruses. And there was a concern that people who had gotten the vaccine got Bell's palsy, but it was disproven. It doesn't appear to be a result of receiving the vaccine. And it's important people to understand that you get Bell's palsy anyway. Like there are going to be people who get the vaccine who have the same things that were going to happen to them in life happen to them afterwards, right? You're going to get the vaccine, you're going to go to work, you're going to take your kids to school, your kid might fall down afterwards, right? You might have a bad day, you might have a heart attack, but it doesn't mean that all of those things are necessarily caused by the vaccine, which is why we have a really rigorous process to actually test which of the side effects that we see are from the vaccine and which are side effects that are just specific to that individual.
Okay, now I do have some questions about the actual vaccine and COVID-19. If you were already infected or if you already had COVID-19, do you need to take this vaccine? And does this vaccine, does it give you the COVID strand? Does it give you COVID-19? Because I hear people on the second dose, their symptoms are really severe.
Yes. So let's talk about this because this is a really important one too that we've heard a lot and it's not true. The COVID vaccines do not give you COVID, even if you feel a little sick or unwell after you receive them. It's not a sign that the vaccine is giving you COVID. Again, it's not possible. None of the vaccines that are out are live vaccines, meaning none of them can actually give you COVID. Now, why do some people feel kind of sick or unwell, especially after the second dose? It's because what happens when you get the vaccine is your body makes those antibodies, but it also makes other inflammatory cells that are part of your immune response. So that if you see COVID, all your fighter cells are kind of up and ready. Well, the next time you get that second dose of a vaccine, it reminds you of what you saw that first time and your fighter cells are ready. And so what you're feeling is your body boosting and raising that same inflammatory immune response so that you have the memory. So if you have those side effects, it actually should reassure you that your vaccine is working. And the common side effects that people have experienced are things like fatigue, feeling tired, headaches, sometimes chills, and sometimes even fever, and then pain at your vaccine site. And most people are getting their vaccines in this muscle up here, your deltoid, your upper shoulder. And so you might also have pain at those sites. If you feel those side effects after you get the vaccine, they're very easy to treat. And so after getting your vaccine, you could take Tylenol or ibuprofen or your preferred kind of pain medication of choice, and they'll essentially just go away. And if you don't take anything, they also just go away in 1 to 2 days.
Interesting. So this is not the COVID-19 that you're getting. There's no live strands. I just want to make sure, just because so many people are like, no. It's almost like the flu vaccination where they insert a little bit of the flu in you, and that's why you get that immunity. But this has nothing to do with that.
It doesn't. It's totally different than the flu vaccine, actually. The mRNA vaccines in particular are kind of brand new vaccines. They had been developed for other infections in the past, but they hadn't really been used in mass like this. And so I think that's why a lot of people had concerns. When you hear the word mRNA, I think it made people think of DNA. I think it made people think that it could affect whether or not they get COVID. And so it's really important for people to understand kind of how they work. With the mRNA vaccine, the M stands for messenger. And so it truly is a little message that tells your body how to make a very specific part of the COVID virus, not the whole virus, just that little outside spike protein, those little balls and spikes you see on the outside of the pictures of COVID. And so if your body can recognize those spikes, when COVID comes up to your cell, it tries to get into your cell using that spike. And so if it can recognize that spike, it can shut the door and say, nope, not here, and then attack COVID essentially so that you don't get it. And so there's no way to get COVID from it because COVID's not in there. It's just a message about how to make the spike. It's like a little email about the spike protein.
Like a little warning, like if you see this, go away. We are attacking on site. Look, it's on site. Okay. Exactly. Now, and just to be clear, if you have had COVID-19, you still need this vaccination.
Oh, yes. Thank you for returning to that. Absolutely. So there's 2 reasons why. One, you need the vaccine because if you've had COVID, you actually don't have the strongest level of long-lasting immunity. So you get actually more fighter cells and a better immune response from the vaccine than you get from actually having COVID. And second, because that immunity then is not just greater, it lasts you longer than when you actually had COVID. And so although having an infection can protect you for a period of time, that protection wanes really quickly after an actual infection and is more long lasting after the vaccine. So it's important that you continue to be protected because we have seen cases worldwide of people who had COVID getting reinfected with a different strain of COVID. And so we don't want people who've had it again to get it again. And if you've had it and it was particularly bad for you, you especially want to avoid having it again.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, I do want to move on. Before I do, I want to ask you about a booster shot. We've been hearing a lot of that lately. Is there going to be a booster shot? Because you've mentioned that there's different strands of COVID-19. Is there going to be a booster shot?
This is a great question. The truth is, there likely will be booster shots. The real question is when and what does that mean for people? So a booster shot, many of us recognize boosters because you got a series of vaccines when you were a child, probably, especially if you went to public schools and it was required. And so many of the times that you got vaccines, you were actually getting a dose of the same vaccine you had received before, which just boosted your immunity for that vaccine. That's why we call it boosts. So we're talking about booster shots for COVID because, as many people have been aware, there are different strains of COVID. And so because there are different types, which means the virus looks just a little bit different, which might make it a little bit more challenging for your immune system to recognize it, we want to make sure that people have kind of the updated way of recognizing it. So if that little message that it's giving you is kind of like a mugshot so that you recognize COVID, but then COVID keeps changing and now it has a hat on or now it has a mustache, we want people to recognize what it looks like. And so the booster doses would help you recognize COVID even as new strains emerge.
Gotcha. Okay, but right now we are just trying to get everybody vaccinated first, and then we'll concentrate it on the booster shots because that hasn't really came out yet, right?
Exactly. Booster shots are not currently recommended. It's something that may come out so people can think about it, but it's nothing real right now. Right now, we just want to make sure that everyone gets your 2 doses if you're getting the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer or Moderna, or you get your single dose if you're getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Gotcha. Now listen, the CDC just came out with some stuff about masks, and it was so important to mask up, and everybody pushes it. And now the CDC says, hey, if you're outside and you're fully vaccinated, you're cool. You don't have to wear a mask. What is that? What is going on here?
I know this is really stressful for people because all of us have really upended our whole lives to make sure that we're wearing masks all the time. And children who are growing up during the pandemic are now completely indoctrinated in that way of living. It feels, awkward and weird to run into an adult who's not wearing a mask, or to have, your parents leave the house and not see them masking. So let's talk through where these guidelines came from. They come from us understanding how COVID is transmitted and who's most at risk for getting infected and for spreading or for sharing COVID with other people. So we know that COVID is transmitted best in settings that have poor ventilation. So those are typically indoor settings, right? Especially ones where you can't open the windows and where you don't have good airflow going through. And then when you're crowded, so if you're close to another person, particularly within 3 to 6 feet of another person, even just that person talking means that they are spreading out little particles that get into the air and that you can breathe in, and then you can be exposed to COVID in that ways. And so the most high risk settings are indoor settings. So the first thing that people should understand is if you are indoors and you are not vaccinated and you're with people who are not in your household, you need to wear a mask. Second, try to avoid those scenarios, honestly. Now is still not a good time for people to be like, for example, eating in restaurants if you're not vaccinated and they don't have good ventilation. And then third, I guess, if you are vaccinated and you're outside, which is an environment in which ventilation is maximum, right? The wind is moving air around, you're getting the maximum ventilation you can get, and you're distanced. You're still outside of 6 feet of all of the other people. You're not in a crowd. Then your risk of both getting COVID exposed to you from another person, or if you had COVID, sharing it with somebody else is so small, especially if you're vaccinated. Because we've already seen data that tells us that vaccinated populations don't seem to actually contract COVID. We had a long concern that perhaps vaccinated folks would get COVID and spread it, but it looks like from the data that they actually don't. And so because it looks like that, that's why they came out with the recommendations to say, you know what, if you're outside and it's great ventilation and nobody's around you and you're vaccinated, you can take your mask off. But that's a lot of things, right? You have to be outside, you have to have nobody around you, and you have to be fully vaccinated, which means you're at least 14 days from your Johnson & Johnson or 14 days from your second dose of the mRNA vaccines. And so for that kind of small group of people for whom that's the case, you then can take your mask off outside. But for people who, even if that is the case for you, if you don't feel comfortable and you still want to wear your mask, as to be totally honest, I do. I just took a walk right now. I have been vaccinated since January with the mRNA vaccines, and I still wore my mask because I still think it's important to model for other people, right? For people who are unvaccinated, who aren't yet ready to take their mask off, that wearing masks can keep you safe. And so I still wore mine. I think it's going to be a transition, Yeah,
because that was my question. A lot of people I know, they're like, oh, if you're vaccinated, you're good. So you don't even need a mask anymore. You don't even need, because you're free. Is that how you should be walking around after you're vaccinated?
No, because I'm glad you said it that way. There's so many things there. And that's why I tried to build up the layers. It's both that you have to be outside, nobody can be around you. So even if you're vaccinated, but you're in a crowd, say you go to an outdoor concert or you're at an outdoor bar or restaurant and there's people surrounding you all within 3 feet of you, you want to have your mask on because you want to make sure you're still not being exposed and not exposing others. So I think the CDC is trying to help people because it's been a really intense time. And for some people, masking has been, just a step beyond what they felt they could do. And so for those folks, they're saying, you know what, if you can just get fully vaccinated, it is likely safe for you to go outside without the mask.
Interesting. Now, I want you to quickly define for me indoors, because I feel like outside is becoming inside. Okay. When it comes to these different restaurants and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, wait, we're building around, and I get it, because people want to open and they want to open safely, but I don't want to be outside if it's raining or if the weather conditions aren't great. So you want to build a covering around me. Is that still considered outdoors if you're covered? You mentioned ventilation. Talk to me.
This is a great question. So you want to have good airflow. So if people are building like an outdoor, meaning it's just outside the restaurant, place for you to eat, but it's covered on all sides, that doesn't have airflow going through both sides. So you want to have at least 2 and ideally all 4 sides open so that air can flow across and be carrying out and in fresh air. So carrying out what people are putting into the air and carrying in fresh air. And so if you're going into a setting where all of the sides are closed, that's not ideal. If it just is a covering for your head for rain or inclement weather, that's fine. But if all of these sides are closed, that's an indoor environment. So you'll know what it feels like. If you can feel kind of wind blow across you, you're in a good, well-ventilated area. And if you worry about that, you can maybe even ask the restaurants you're eating at to just station the fan kind of next to you. Because a lot of the country is going to go into a time and part of our state where it's about to be hot and there's not going to be as much wind, and it, might feel really kind of stagnant in the air and humid. And so if it feels like that, ask for fans so it can just keep blowing the air around.
Interesting. Good stuff. Good stuff. Now, I see people walking around so many different places and they are wearing the mask, to me, improperly. So I want to ask a doctor, because the thing is, if your nose is exposed, if your mouth is exposed, it defeats the purpose of a whole mask, right?
Absolutely. I actually brought my mask here, so I'll just show you guys if that's okay. So I wear a surgical mask, which is the type of mask I get actually at my workplace. These are the high filtration masks. If you have a mask like this that you got from your doctor's office when you went for a visit, or that you got at your vaccination site or your COVID testing site, this mask alone is enough. If instead you're wearing a mask that's made out of cloth, it's been shown that it's really helpful to actually double up those cloth masks so that you increase the amount of protection so that it becomes more high filter like this. So it filters out most of the things, right? So when you put it on, I usually start by putting it, and this is good too for people who wear glasses. I start by
the fog. Oh my gosh, I get caught in the fog all the time, and I'm like,
right?
Okay.
Yes. Here's the pro tip. So you want to put it under your glasses, actually. So this one I've already been wearing, so the nose bridge is bent. But if the nose bridge is flat, I bend the nose bridge and I sit it under my glasses. Then I go and you put it obviously around your ears. If you wear hoop earrings, pop out your hoops.
Yes, you gotta let them know. You gotta let them know.
Okay. And then, so now it's around my ears, it's over my nose. And then if you have the surgical mask, it already has this little nose bridge that allows you to kind of push in. You want it to be flush against this area. This is also what helps you not have the fog collect on your glasses. If you're seeing fog on your glasses, it's a sign that air is escaping your mask. And that means other things can come in through your mask. So the fog isn't just annoying, it's a sign you don't have a good seal and it's not as protective for you. So station it under your glasses like this if you wear glasses, and then push along your nasal bridge so you get this tight seal, if y'all can see that. And then ideally you want it to also come under your chin, if you can see my chin here. So I don't want it like this, right? Because now air is coming from my mouth out and exposing other people. I want it all the way around like that. And if you have cloth masks, then you can put another mask over this one. This is kind of the ideal way to wear your mask, if you have it. You don't want, so this is what to do. What should we not do? I see people like this all the time. And sometimes, honestly, it's not their fault. It's because the mask sometimes pulls itself down over time. And so if it does that, you need to actually stop and reposition it fully so it's further up on your nasal bridge and it can kind of sit higher up. And then obviously, I think we've all seen people who walk around like this. It's critical to understand that this provides zero protection, just none. This isn't protecting you. It's not protecting other people. And so this is just a chin strap. It's not actually a mask in that case.
Exactly. Now, on the sides, is there air? It's no air should be coming out of the sides either. Is that right?
So technically, with many of the masks that we're wearing, the place where air will come in and out is through the sides. But if you have a good fit with your mask, hold on, let me pop out my hoop. If you have a good fit with your mask and you position it well on your nose, you're also going to get minimum air coming out through the sides, but you can get some. So you want it to be as flush to your face as possible.
Okay.
And then you can see a little bit on the sides that it puckers a little bit, but it's still touching my face on that side, and it's still touching on this side, but it's not touching as strongly as it is across my nose. And that's okay too. It helps us get a little air through our mask so that we can still, breathe comfortably in these masks. But you want it to be as close to kind of hugging your cheeks, nose, and chin as you can.
Okay, now you mentioned it's about to get super hot. And a lot of us are very concerned because, there has been studies that show that a lot of people are smelling their breath and it is not pleasant. And hot breath is if you talk a lot with your mask on, that heat builds up and then it just goes straight to your face. Do you have any tips when it comes to, as we're getting into the hotter seasons?
Yes, there are a couple of tips that we honestly just have from medicine because we've been wearing these masks for years. This is a surgical mask because surgeons wear this mask every time they go into the OR. We wear this mask when we do procedures. We had been wearing this mask at my clinic during flu season. So we wear these masks all the time. Some tips that we use, because the mask can sometimes smell weird too, is you can actually spray an essential oil on the inside of your mask. Remember, it's filtering things. So if you spray it on the outside, you won't be able to smell it on the inside. But if you're worried about kind of your own breath or other foul odors or just how funny these masks smell, you can spray an essential oil inside your mask. Peppermint is a really helpful one. Peppermint kind of diffuses other bad odors. And then you can put it on kind of the way that we described, and then you'll just be smelling kind of the freshness of peppermint. For the heat inside the masks, I think it might be a challenge this summer, which is another reason why everybody should get vaccinated. If you don't want to wear the mask when you're outside and you're hot, and now that the CDC says you don't have to, get fully vaccinated. Now is the time.
That's an incentive. Look, yet another incentive. Now I've seen these bridges for your mask, especially when it comes to cloth one, because we try to make things cute. The surgical ones are not as cute, but and the cloth ones stick to your face, as I'm sure the surgical ones do too. But I've seen this bridge. Have you seen this little face mask bridge?
No, describe it. What does it do?
So basically, it makes sure I actually have one, but I do. Hold on. Pause for a call.
Okay, we are going to look at this. I'm excited to see because I'm sure some of you guys at home also have this bridge, and we'll see if this bridge is safe.
It's actually really good. So it looks like this.
Oh.
And so what happens is you put it here and then you put the face mask on, and it actually helps you breathe a lot better just because you're not breathing in the face mask or the cloth or whatever you have on. You know what I mean? So it actually helps you a little bit, and it's not it's like a silicone material, so it doesn't scratch up your face. I hear a lot of women like it because of the makeup situation. Is something like this safe?
I think that actually does look safe because I like that it goes all the way around your face, which will also allow your mask to adhere to those parts of the bridge, but to stay away from your mouth, which is where, a little bit of extra space is comfortable for people. So I like that it has that silicone that goes all the way around that can help your mask stick to your nose, cheek, and chin. So I think that looks good.
Good stuff. Now, when it comes to face mask care, because I know I've seen a lot of people talk to me about, the acne that happens, the irritation, and we talked about the heat that just gathers all in there as you kind of talk and everything like that. Let's talk about your face mask care. Do you have any tips for that?
Yes. So I'll give one example from what I do. I tend to switch this mask every 3 or so days when I wear it at work, or every day, honestly, because we wear a different mask when we get to work. So I'll wear this into work and then wear a different mask at work and then switch this every few days. I think the paper ones are good like that because your oils can build up on the inside, which contributes to some skin irritation. If you have a cloth mask, I would wash it in the same detergent you use to wash your other towels and products that you use on your face, so that it's one that doesn't irritate your face. And then make sure when you wash it that it doesn't warp the mask, and that it dries fully so that there isn't extra moisture or water in the mask. If it smells a little funny after you wash it, it may be time actually to make a new cloth mask.
And how often are you washing these masks?
I would wash it the way you wash your like sheets and pillowcases, because those are also where you're constantly exposed directly to a fabric that rubs against your face and causes irritation. You know, some people wash their sheets every week. I think that's reasonable. Some people go a couple of weeks, depending on, you know, how hot you get at night and how uncomfortable that may be in your sleep environment. So I would say every 1 to 2 weeks is a general good rule for your masks. When you're doing laundry, just toss your mask in there too.
Good stuff. Well, I mean, I am just super fed, and I feel like, okay, I feel good about this. Now, I know you talked about masks and washing it and everything like that. Now, when it comes to traveling, do you do the same routine?
With washing the mask?
With washing the mask, putting because you're going on an airport, you're being exposed to multiple people. A lot of times, yes, you are spaced out, you are distanced when it comes to being inside of the airport. But then sometimes when you get into the aircraft, everybody's on top of everybody still. How would you advocate for us to kind of do things when we travel?
You want to wear your highest filtration, like your best mask that blocks the most things when you travel. So if people have what's called an N95, which blocks kind of 95% of particles, or if you have an even higher number, those are good ones to wear when you travel, just to make sure you're not as exposed when you get into that smaller contained environment inside the airplane. You also want to make sure that you don't remove your mask, or you remove it as infrequently as possible when you're on the airplane. So it's fine to take sips of water or to go to the restroom. And if you need to like dab off your face, it's fine. But you don't want to go prolonged periods on airplanes without having your mask on. Again, because in that environment, obviously, while they're filtering the air at a higher rate now during the pandemic, it still is, not the greatest ventilation that you would have, for example, if you were outdoors. And so just to step up your mask to the highest filtration that you have is really helpful. And then to wear it as much as you can, and if possible, to not remove it if you're just on a short flight, to just leave it on the entire time you're on the plane is really useful.
All right. So the best way to kind of combat COVID-19 is to get vaccinated and still continue to wear your mask, right?
Absolutely. And a third I would add is wash your hands. I think it's also really important that people understand that COVID can live on surfaces, and that often people, we use our hands for so many things. We might cough into our hands, sneeze into our hands, and then touch other public surfaces that other people touch. So washing your hands, washing your kids' hands is also a good way of helping prevent the spread of COVID.
That's really good, because I didn't even realize how nasty I was. Honestly, I was like, oh my gosh, I am so nasty. I didn't realize how I did not wash my hands after so many different things. And I can actually see the dirt come off. And I'm thinking, what did I do? Like, I didn't even do anything, and there's dirt on my hands. Absolutely nasty. Ugh, okay. So just to be clear, how can people get vaccinated?
So you can go to the CDC's website to find out vaccination sites near you. Here in California, you can go to, you can Google californiavaccinate.gov and find out sites near you. You can go to our website, www.betweenusaboutus.org, to find vaccination sites near you. Now, since April 19th, everybody in our state is eligible to get a COVID vaccine who's 16 years and older. So there shouldn't be you should not be concerned that you will be turned away at any vaccination site. You can literally get your vaccine at your provider, at a pharmacy, at a mass vaccination site. So visit those sites to see, and we'll put those sites up too so folks can see them.
Perfect. And when it comes to like things reopening, how do you see things happening this summer? Are we going to be fully at different concerts? Are we going to be at different bars? Like, what's going on? Do you see that happening for us?
I think it's going to be a challenging summer, to be honest. It appears that we are at the end of what has been our fourth wave, like our second kind of increase of COVID cases that kind of hit Michigan the hardest in our country. And that wave seems to be ending as we're going into spring and summer. But I think we have to be mindful that we still don't have what we call herd immunity. We still don't have 70 to 80% of our population vaccinated, which means we still can't fully just fling the doors wide open and gather in large crowds and groups as if, you know, there isn't still a global pandemic going on. So while we can do a little bit more, because, you know, I think it's like now about 40% of our population has at least one dose of a COVID vaccine, which is so encouraging. We really want to get to 80% of our vaccination having 2 doses if they received one of the mRNA, or at least their 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson. And, you know, we're trying to get there by July 4th, which is the date the Biden administration set for us so that people can gather in groups and celebrate the 4th. But it's a lot of work to do it. So talk to your friends, talk to your family, make sure everyone gets vaccinated so that we can have a beautiful summer together.
Yeah. And just because you're vaccinated, you can still get COVID-19. Is that correct?
It is correct.
Okay.
It is correct that people who are vaccinated can get COVID-19. The vaccines decrease your risk of getting seriously ill if you have COVID-19, and it significantly decreases your risk of dying from COVID-19. And so right now, the real world effectiveness of the mRNA vaccines appears to be around 90%, which means most people will be prevented from getting sick and dying from COVID, but not everybody. And so it's really important to understand that even while you're vaccinated, taking some precautions is just good. And then making sure everyone around you is vaccinated is really good so that you don't have, you know, folks in your household who can potentially transmit it to you or who can get sick themselves.
Yeah, so definitely, please, ladies and gentlemen, remember to keep your mask on in public, even if you have been vaccinated, until we reach, like you said, herd immunity, community immunity. And this is our best tool to kind of help and stop this whole pandemic.
Exactly. If you're in a crowd for any reason, whether you're indoors or outdoors, it's really important to mask whether you're vaccinated or not. And now, you know, we're seeing guidelines kind of open up for people who are vaccinated, who are outside and not around people who don't have to mask. And the truth is, as more people get vaccinated, more of those things will become possible. So vaccines really are the way that we can try to return to a semblance of life like we might have remembered it before. So please really, really consider getting vaccinated and talk to your family about it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so very much, Dr. Boyd, for just taking the time and just breaking things down for us. This is exactly what we need. Women's Health Expo 2021, and it's our 21st year. I mean, thank you so very much. Any final words? Is there anything else you would like to say?
I would just say if folks are interested and they just want more information, please visit our website, www.betweenusaboutus.org. We go through all of these questions. If you just want to hear it again or you want to hear another provider say it, please visit that website. We are also releasing videos in Spanish. So if you have a Spanish-speaking family member or you live in a Spanish-speaking community and you want to share these same resources, we have an entire platform that will launch later in May. So jump back to our website and you'll see a way to also see all of the information in Spanish really soon.
Awesome. Also, you can learn more about vaccines at vaccinateall58.com and harm reduction guidelines at covid19.ca.gov. Thank you again so very much. All right, on to the next panel. Thank you guys so very much for joining us. I'm Ellie Andrews. That was Dr. Boyd, and you are still into the Women's Health Expo. We're digital, virtual this year, and it's still going to be great.